All right, we're streaming. Let's go. All right, this is a response to Bolo, the producer, on his FL Studio sampler claims, saying that it is more pure than other samplers and other DAWs at retaining the sample structure and gain structure. And I did some tests, and this is what I found out. So if you were to set up, I'm using Decap's Future Wave kick sample from Drums That Knock Volume 2. I put it here in the sampler. So if you go to the piano roll, 100% velocity, just 4 on the floor or 2 on the floor, and then just drop the sample in the timeline. I'm gonna play the sample on the timeline first, and you'll see me go back and forth between turning on that and then going up here to track 1, and or I'll just make it simpler. I'll go from song mode to pattern mode, and I'll just play pattern 1. That'd be a simpler way. Check this out. That's the kick on the timeline. Here's the kick in the pattern. Back on the timeline. Let's go back to pattern. So the pattern is definitely quieter than just on the timeline. I don't have it assigned track. I wonder if that's going to make any difference for the sample. Let's put the sample on the same track as 1. Let's see if that affects anything. Let's try that again. So pattern first, and then we're going to go to the timeline sample drop. Again, even if you look at the meter on the master, there is quite of a gain boost on the timeline drop. You claimed that people were throwing samples onto the timeline of their DAWs to get a purer sound, and FL didn't need to do that, but this, to the contrary, says differently. And as you'll see on the sampler, there is nothing about gain structure being changed about it. It's just how I dropped it in there. The envelope's off. I mean, the modulation's off. I mean, navel pitch is on, but everything else is off, dude. So that ain't the case. Now, if you go over to Studio One over here, I've already prepared this. I've exported it out. The first series here are normal. So I'll go to the mixer so you can see Bolo. I have it phase inverted. The timeline of each one, or excuse me, the MIDI sampler of each one is phase inverted versus the timeline. And as you'll see, even the first normaled version doesn't quite cancel out. So it's going to play the normaled null test, normalization, so they're both the same exact volume. Then it's going to go to, and these are not, as you see, if you look over here, I'll make sure that these do not follow. Do not follow. So these are not following. No, there's no time stretching, no manipulation of the wave whatsoever. Don't follow. And then sample 1. So I have sample 1, the Studio One sampler over here. Everything's off. No effects. No envelopes, no nothing. All right, this is what it is. So this is their sampler. All right. And if you look at the MIDI, if I can go over there to it, 100% velocity. So it's a 1-to-1 test. That is 100% velocity. All right. Just phase flips. Here we go. So we're going to go from the normalized bounce out of FL test and phase inverted. So it's null testing that. Then we're going to null test without normalization, and then it's going to stop and loop upon the future wave kick dropped on the timeline here in Studio One versus the sampler. And we're going to see which sampler is more pure. Let's see. Again. Now, the first two are normalized, so he had to normalize it to get the same gain structure out of FL. So there is definitely, you're right about, there's definitely a sound to FL sampler. Indeed. Just a little bit of a sound, though. It's not too much different once you normalize it. I guess it is more pure than Studio One's. I'll give you that. It doesn't affect the sample as much, but it definitely isn't the same gain structure, where Studio One maintained gain structure, but there is like an attack difference over here in Studio One in the null test against each other. Let's check that out again. And as you see this middle one here, Bolo, this is the unnormalized version, and there's like a 2 decibel difference or so. The drop on the timeline is the actual gain versus, the sampler. Where the sampler here, we'll look at the mixer here on Studio One. They're about the same level. Oh, I got them at -3. My bad. So I had them quieter. It don't matter. It don't matter. It's going to cancel the same. Let's do that again. I mean, as you see, they're both hitting zero full scale when it comes to 0 dB. They're as decap made them. However, with the face flipped, it is doing some attack thing there. But the low end all cancels out, so it's changing the upper frequencies somehow. And if you go to the normalized version, because we already know the unnormalized version of FL is not going to even be close to nulling. But if we go to the normalized version, where they're the same gain structure, same peak values, it's changing something slightly in the low end. That is interesting. Back to the Studio One sampler version, where it's only changing the high end. So the low end in the Studio One is arguably more quote-unquote pure, as you've claimed, with but the low end. So the low end in Studio One / Pro Studio is more accurate. But the high end attack is doing something weird there. Let's listen to that again. Like it's nowhere near canceling out. And that is very interesting. Where if you go to the FL version of the bounces, everything cancels but a little bit of low end on the normalized, version. So it's doing something phasey. They both are. They're both different. The argument of one being better than the other, I don't think that really matters that much. But the sampler in Studio One definitely does have a sound, and I'm sure different DAWs have a sound. And I wonder if the Pro Studio even has a different sound now versus Studio One, because this is Studio One 7. Anyhow, I wanted to respond to that video because I was curious and it was kind of bugging me. But yeah, I mean, you're not going to catch me going back to FL, bro. I mean, the sound of the DAW, so to speak. there isn't really much of a sound. I mean, let's test that too. That brings up a thought. Let's see what happens if we compare the timeline versus the timeline in here. So this is the timeline bounce from FL versus what's on the timeline here. Let's just copy this over. Make sure one of these is phase and flipped. So let's do that. So this is the raw. Yeah. And we'll phase and flip the raw here. Mute the... Yeah, okay. So this is the FL versus Studio One timeline bounce. This is export. So this is going to be interesting. What happens here? Almost a perfect null. There's like a little clip thing, little tick. There's, you know, as you see, there's something registering over here. Probably because it's an export. Maybe there was, what do you call it? Hell, I don't remember the name of it right now. Dither, that's it. Maybe there was some dithering that created that difference, or there's just something so subtle in timing that's off. But it's almost a perfect null. So that is the raw timeline bounce out of FL versus, yeah, the time just it dropped on the timeline here in Studio One, no bounce. That's interesting. So let's go ahead and mute this, unphase and invert that. Now I kind of want to see the normalized, because I know that's going to be closer in volume, the normalized FL sampler version against the Studio One sampler version. Now that will be interesting. Let's check that out. Sampler versus sampler. One phase and flipped, one not. We already know this is going to be really different. It has to be. But let's go ahead and hear it back. Pretty much the same versus just the future wave dropped in here. Let's check it out against just the future wave in Studio One with the null test that way. Let's check that out. It's about the same difference just in overall output, but just slightly different sounding. So there is a difference in samplers, and that is interesting. It's very interesting. Does one sound better than the other? I think it's how the user uses it, man. Honestly. And with that being said, I kind of want to see what Impact does against Sample 1. So let's go ahead and pull in Impact. See how different Impact is with this. Same sample. The same shit. I could pull it in from the timeline too. We want it to be C1. Yes, sir. Boom. All right. Not touching it. Nothing's on. It's a one shot. Yeah. Make a little pattern for it. Edit that pattern on C1. That's already there, dude. Let's see how different that is versus sample 1. Is there going to be a difference in the sampling style of these two same brand products? That's a decent question. Okay, so let's flip the phase. Oh, one's already phased and flip. So we should know right off the bat. Let's make sure nothing else is playing. So let's mute everything else and just listen to Impact versus Sample 1 Make sure it's 100% velocity too. I did not do that. That's important. And they're not 100% velocity. They are now. Okay. Now, 100% velocity, 100% velocity. Let's go. They perfectly nulled. To ear at least. Let's look at the meters. Yep. Perfectly null. So they're using the same exact algorithm to adjust the sample. So these are the same algorithm at their core. Interesting. Really interesting. Anyhow, I hope this was informative to somebody. Like, subscribe. Send this to Bolo. Shout out to Bolo. I've been a fan, man. But, you know, that it's kind of a fallacy that, you know, FL doesn't change anything. It does definitely take about 2 decibels off the volume. Maybe that's what we're hearing. Maybe for the most part, it's just that people ain't killing their master track with too much gain and, you know, overworking limiters and stuff when they use a sampler, because it turns it down a couple decibels. And it kind of changes their sound a little bit where the low end won't null. Where Studio One's the opposite. It like changes the attack and high end, where that won't null, but the low end nulls. It's like it's doing a phase thing, kind of like EQ does with phase. So anyhow,